Hundreds of people in Somalia are dying every day, and the UN is warning that the famine is spreading. International aid has been pledged, but why isn't it reaching those most in need? And how can aid agencies operate while the fighting goes on? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Felicity Barr. Somalia is sick and tired of waiting for progress. The words of the Somali Prime Minister as political leaders discussed a possible deal to replace the fragile transitional government. But while the talking goes on, hundreds of Somalis are dying and thousands more are starving, the result of drought, famine and decades of war. Nazni Mashiri has more.
Halima comes from the Bai region in southern Somalia, now officially a famine zone. Like so many here, she left everything behind to reach this hospital.
Everyone was just thinking about themselves and how they could get out. I just wanted to get my children and grandchildren to Mogadishu.
Most of the people here have travelled long distances from territory held by AlShabaab Islamist fighters. 7-month-old Hidaye's bloated stomach is a sign of severe malnutrition. It took the family 3 days to get here. The United Nations says it needs more money, $1 billion. But one leading charity says the public is being misled into believing that money can solve this crisis.
Médecins Sans Frontières wants international aid agencies to admit that reaching some of the worst affected victims of famine may be impossible. They've condemned aid agencies and parts of the media for glossing over the realities of the situation, saying that food and water may not be enough.
The World Food Programme, which is providing most of Somalia's food, says lives can be saved, but admits there are millions of people it cannot reach.
WFP has no access to those areas. There are other organizations that do have access, and we urge donors to support those other organizations. And until we do get access, WFP really can't do anything in those areas.
This footage shot by an Al Jazeera producer shows the worsening situation in territory held by Al-Shabaab fighters. This is Lower Shabelle in southern Somalia. Most of the cattle here have died. There's been some rain, but not enough to grow anything to eat. Al-Shabaab is allowing some aid workers in, but it's already too late.
People have left for Mogadishu. What you're seeing now is the last of us. Only God can save us now.
In Mogadishu, there are now around 500,000 refugees. And there are warnings from the United Nations. The famine could spread to the entire south of the country by the end of the year.
So a truly desperate situation. Well, let's now introduce our two guests. Firstly, joining us from Mogadishu is Abdullahi Godabare. He is the Somali Minister for Planning and International Cooperation. And in Nairobi, we have Joachim Delville, head of the Somalia mission for Médecins Sans Frontières. Gentlemen, welcome to the programme. Let's begin with Abdullahi Godabare. How much do you despair for your country, sir, when you see those images of children who are literally starving to death?
Well, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. It's quite true what you have seen. The world has witnessed it through your lenses. The drought and its effect is very devastating. A lot of lives of a lot of children and a lot of population, a lot of people are on the stake. You have seen what the impact of the drought is, and this is combated by lack of security and prolonged civil war.
Joachim Delville, the UN's been talking about the chance that the entire southern area of Somalia could be in famine situation by the end of the year. Do you agree with that assessment? Just how bad is it?
Okay, well, there's no doubt that Somalia is experiencing a very severe humanitarian crisis, which results in the movement, the displacement of thousands of Somali people, both within the country and to bordering Kenya and Ethiopia. Now, what our teams Médecins Sans Frontières teams are witnessing on the ground is a sharp increase in malnutrition rates. Children, up to 10% of children facing severe malnutrition inside Somalia, and up to 50% of the children crossing the border into Ethiopia, for example, facing acute malnutrition.
Yeah, truly horrific situation. We're going to talk more about those issues in a moment. But first, a bit more background on Somalia, which is, as we've been hearing, dealing with some huge problems. The country itself has had no stable government since 1991. Many areas are still under self-rule, with control being held by local leaders. Somalia has also been plagued by a terrible civil war. AlShabaab, the Islamist group trying to overthrow the government, was recently driven out of the capital, Mogadishu. But it still controls much of the southern area, and of course civilians are caught up in the violence there. And it is this lack of stability and lawlessness that has made it easy for pirates to flourish. They've made millions of dollars illegally, while again it is the vast majority of ordinary Somalis who suffer. Joachim Delville, just how difficult is it for Médecins Sans Frontières to operate in the southern area? Are you able to do it? What sort of dangers are your staff facing?
Well, Médecins Sans Frontières has been working for the last 20 years in Somalia in a continuous way, which has been the result of constant work through the communities, ensuring the acceptance of our operations. But it is a difficult environment to work in, with many challenges for us. And certainly today, for Médecins Sans Frontières, our main challenge is to scale up operations. Now, in doing so, we face a number of access problems. Of course, there's a widespread violence which prevents us from scaling up operations. Our aid workers who are present on the field face constant risks of being targeted. That's a reality we shouldn't forget, but it's perhaps not so new. Other access restrictions are related to the fact of us facing difficulties in bringing international technical support staff, very much needed for our emergency interventions, as well as difficulties in bringing in very much needed medical supplies through much of the airstrips of south central Somalia, which up to date are still closed. But nonetheless, I mean, we are present in Somalia. We have about 1,500 Somali staff working around the clock in 8 different regions of south central Somalia, and currently feeding 40,000 children in Somalia, but also in neighboring Kenya and Ethiopia.
But Joachim, what is causing the difficulties? Who is stopping you bringing in the extra staff, the humanitarian supplies that I know are being donated? Is it AlShabaab, or are you having problems with the government as well?
Well, again, I think it's not a matter of pointing fingers. As I was saying, Somalia has always been a complex environment for aid agencies to operate in, and in particular for Médecins Sans Frontières. We are facing restrictions in all parts of Somalia, regardless who the authority is. But again, our main strategy for entering into new territories, for maintaining our presence in our 13 projects, which are currently running in south central Somalia, is based on local acceptance. So there are areas where today we are not present, and Médecins Sans Frontières is striving to negotiate access to those areas. So there's a number of different factors happening, and I can't really blame one group or the other.
OK, well, Abdullahi Goda Bare, is there not more that the transitional government could be doing to help the aid agencies like Médecins Sans Frontières, making the bureaucracy easier, allowing them to bring staff in, certainly into the capital Mogadishu, who can then distribute the aid that is desperately needed?
Well, definitely, wherever the government has access, and we have authority that we can exercise, the access is not a problem. I think the international community knows about that. We, in Mogadishu, for example, we have established 350 well-trained police officers who are going to deliver the aid. And we have no doubt that we have the capacity to deliver food aid and any other aid related to the drought in Mogadishu. Out of Mogadishu, wherever we can access. Wherever Shabab is not present, it's not difficult to have an access, and the international community are already doing their work in the area that's not controlled by AlShabaab. Wherever AlShabaab is present, the access is very limited.
Sure, I understand that. There are though.
My friend.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir, but I have to say there have been accusations that within Mogadishu itself there are corrupt government officials who've been taking the aid and distributing it according to their own desires rather than through international channels or official channels. How do you respond to those accusations that there are corrupt officials operating either within the government or just outside the government in Mogadishu itself?
Actually, there was an incident that have been publicized very much, and what the value that was involved, if I tell you, you will be surprised. There is no such thing that's called corrupted officers. There are incidents that some people with the uniform of our army has tried to ambush and took advantage. But that was only one incident, and what was involved in that incident, I could easily say it was not more than $2,000 value of product. It has been publicized and it had been made like this is a norm, but I can guarantee you in Mogadishu and any other places, there is no such diversion. There is police officers of 350 that are dedicated to deliver, and we don't have a problem, and the international community knows about that.
Okay.
The problem is where AlShabaab is, and that's where we need to open access.
Joachim Delville, I know that the president of your organisation, the president of Médecins Sans Frontières, has come out and said it's hard for agencies to admit, but there are simply areas where you cannot go to, partly because of AlShabaab, and that the people there are going to die because you can't get the help to them. It's a difficult one for charities, for aid groups, isn't it? But I guess it does have to be spelt out that this is the situation as it is.
Yes, exactly. As you're saying, we have to be frank. There are many parts of Somalia which are still difficult for Médecins Sans Frontières to access. Although, as I was saying, we are in 8 regions of south-central Somalia with a large number of staff. Last year only we provided 500,000 consultations to Somali population. So it is possible to work in Somalia, but access to new areas is extremely difficult, as are simple procedures for an organization like Médecins Sans Frontières of recruiting nurses, hiring vehicles on the ground. All these are very complex procedures because they take a lot of negotiations. And on top of that, you add, of course, the rampant insecurity, which is much particular to the Somali context.
Absolutely. I mean, the International Committee of the Red Cross says it is able to operate in most parts of southern Somalia, partly because they hold consultations, if you like, with local leaders. I guess those are local leaders that do have some sort of connection to AlShabaab. Is this a difficult one for aid agencies like MSF to weigh up whether or not you actually try to negotiate with the fighters who are controlling the area, like AlShabaab, and is MSF trying to do that?
Well, in effect, it is essential for us, Médecins Sans Frontières, to constantly engage with local communities, with local authorities, and in conflict situations we have to engage with warring parties as well to ensure the acceptance of our operations, to ensure the continuity of our operations, and of course the security of our staff and patients.
Abdullah Godabare, I've been reading reports that AlShabaab are running out of money, their popularity is declining, that there are splits in the leadership, but they do still rule much of the south. Can you explain why that is? Why hasn't the transitional government been able to take advantage of the fact that AlShabaab seems to have been struggling in recent months?
Well, that information is quite correct. They are split among themselves, and we hope that they will split again and again until they vanish. But capacity is capacity. We don't want stretch our small resource to the extent that we cannot impact a result. But that wouldn't mean that we are not in the plan, and that wouldn't mean that the international community and friendly countries are not helping us. So we are in the workings, and hopefully we will try a solution, to find a solution for the problem of AlShabaab.
Sure, but the problem, of course, is in the meantime that many people, as we've seen, are dying. Do you need more help, more troops from the African Union? Would that be of assistance in tackling AlShabaab?
Well, definitely we need more help, because the drought is just a start. The predictions are that it will get worse, and that there will not be there will be a massive impact of the drought that's coming, and we don't see any relief until December. So definitely we need an intervention, probably the intervention that has been done before in 1993.
So what intervention are you talking about? Just spell it out for us.
Well, if you have to deal with AlShabaab, there is no other intervention. You have to do a military intervention. There is no other way. AlShabaab doesn't negotiate. We encourage the local communities to deal with them, to open access. We encourage local communities to do whatever they can do to reduce the impact. But reality is reality. Unless you defeat AlShabaab, access will be always difficult.
I just want to
appeal to the world to come to our aid.
Right. I did want to make this absolutely clear. You do want some sort of military intervention, but who do you want to come to your assistance? Are you talking about more troops from the African Union, or are you talking wider? Because we all know what happened when the US got involved.
Well, in our opinion, the most appropriate army is the African army, because they are close, they are with us already. So it's more logic that we increase the number of African Union presence. But the massiveness of the drought and its impact, I think if the world can increase more than that and do that, that will be also appreciated and welcome.
So you are talking about wanting military help from outside the continent of Africa then?
Well, what we are appealing for, if we can increase the presence of African army, but on top of that, if we can get even more, that would be very good.
Joachim Delville, we've all seen the desperate appeals on our television screens urging us to give money, to donate money to the drought, the famine in Somalia. But are you actually getting the amount of money that you need? Because I'm hearing reports that the money is being pledged, it is being given. It's simply the problem of distribution. Is that right, or is more money needed to be raised?
Well, we should definitely acknowledge the immense generosity that has come from the international community to support the Somalia crisis. And money is needed to scale up operations, certainly the case for Médecins Sans Frontières. However, let's not think that money is the only solution, because indeed the solution is to be able to deliver the aid where the needs are. And much of that aid is today being delivered into places like Mogadishu, into neighboring Kenyan, Ethiopia refugee camps. But again, it's only pockets of south-central Somalia areas which are actually receiving the aid. So money is very much needed, and I think everyone will agree on that. But aid needs to be delivered to the beneficiaries.
And what, from your perspective, is the solution to that, to help you to be able to deliver that aid? Do you require the African Union troops, for example, to go with you, or does that cause even more problems when you try to distribute the aid? Because obviously you have to balance your security, but also that can cause problems on the ground for you, can't it?
Well, for Médecins Sans Frontières, it's very obvious that our humanitarian assistance can only be delivered in an independent way, which means us carrying out independent assessments, independent medical interventions, without the intervention, the support from whichever authority, whether they're political, military, civilian. And in that regard, of course, we do not do joint operations with AMISOM or with any other warring party in Somalia. So I would say a condition to be able to deliver aid in Somalia is to be able to maintain this independence and neutrality in the delivery of aid.
I guess it's also not, Joachim, just about immediate aid, is it? You're not talking just about food and medical supplies. Part of the problem has been the famine, the drought, the fact that they have had no crops to harvest, that their livestock are all dying. You have to plan for the long term as well, don't you?
Well, indeed, Somalia is a long-term crisis. There's been a civilian conflict for the last 20 years. Now, again, as an aid organization, Médecins Sans Frontières has a mandate to respond to the emergency situation and to the emergency needs. However, there is an obvious need to work on issues related to peace and stability so that Somali people can regain their livelihoods and access such basic services as health, education, and so on.
Abdullahi Godabare, Al-Shabaab have now fled Mogadishu, but you're struggling clearly to send African Union troops out to deal with them outside of the capital. Effectively, it sounds like the government of the moment has admitted defeat, that it simply cannot tackle Al-Shabaab.
Well, that's quite true. What's true is that the government has a very limited capacity to gain more territories. But that wouldn't mean that the government is with no plan, and we are organizing ourselves with the help of the rest of the world, and we will pursue. You know, like this is a task that we have to do, and we're doing it.
And when are we going to see the formation of a new government, a government that is less fragile than the one that's been operating for the last couple of years?
Well, the transitional governments that changed over the years is getting every day more strong, and is gaining more strength, and that's where we're heading, and I think we are very happy with it. Today, as you may be aware of, we had a roadmap. We have a clear idea how we're going to get out of the transition government. We have 12 months to accomplish that job. The world has witnessed it. The Somalis are united. And I think we believe we are very optimistic we will get out of this transition.
But there's been optimism before, hasn't there? Do you think the civilian population really believe that things are about to change for Somalia?
Well, I think the optimism is real. I believe that we have a roadmap, a very clear roadmap that took us to prepare for a few months. And today, your cameras has witnessed that we are united. All the international communities were witness, and it's a fair roadmap, and I think we will do the job. We're determined to do the job.
All right, gentlemen, we are out of time, so I must now thank our guests. We have Joachim Delville in Nairobi, and of course Abdullahi Godabare, who I was just speaking to. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. As ever, we welcome your comments and suggestions, so please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. But from me, Felicity Barr, it's goodbye.